Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Spirit of Liberty. Appreciate you joining me today. I was almost late getting started. Fortunately, I had everything ready to go. I started working on Wednesday's message, and I was in such deep thought, it just snuck up on me that it was time to get going. That noon came, so bear with me for as I am a little bit late, I think, getting started. But I'm excited about today's topic, a very important one that I want to talk about, and that is about saying no to drugs. And drugs are a huge problem for people today. And yes, I am including things like alcohol and marijuana. People ask me, do you think marijuana is a sin? Yes. Yes. Do I think it's, I don't care if it's legal. I'm telling you right now, I think it's all stuff that you ought to stay away from. I think it is unacceptable. I think everybody, every Christian especially, ought to do everything they can to stay away from these legal drugs like alcohol and marijuana. And I'm not gonna go into a super deep theological thing when it comes to this, as far as showing, going through all the stupid arguments people make to justify alcohol, things like alcohol. But at the same time, I'm going to mainly focus on drugs, just because, again, this is something that's a huge problem in our country. So many people are on drugs today, and so many problems that people are having are because of drugs. There are so many side effects that come with it, and people are just breaking their brains with these things. And I'm telling you right now, we could solve a lot of problems if people just would say no to drugs. If they would just say no to alcohol, a lot of major problems that we're having would go away. And so I'm going to go through this article that I was reading, because the question is, why do people do drugs? And I was very blessed. Again, I grew up in a home where we were taught not to do any of that stuff. It was not glorified in any way. It was looked at as very bad. If my dad would do everything he could to avoid us even having to look at alcohol. We'd stay away from restaurants that serve alcohol. And that was hard because, almost every place serves it now these days. I remember my dad protesting Kmart because they started selling alcohol. And so he wouldn't even go there. And, now there's this, you can't go to any grocery store, even Walmart sells it. It's terrible. But I'm thankful that we were taught that way. And so if we were in a store and they were alcohol there, my dad would tell us, don't even look at it. It's like, where do you get that? Well, you got that from the book of Proverbs. And I'm glad, I was taught to have a hatred for that stuff. And because I'm glad I had it. I was never tempted with it. Never been tempted with drugs. And one of the reasons I've never been tempted with drugs is because I've seen a lot of druggies. I've seen what it does. I've looked at the fruit, and I'm not interested. And so this article, I'm gonna kind of go through. They give 7 reasons why, the top 7 reasons for why people start doing drugs. And I think this is interesting. I think it's something that we need to understand, and I do. I think these, what they came up with, is pretty accurate. And I think it's important that we have a proper understanding about these things, that we know what the Bible says about these things, because there is no reason for you to start doing these drugs. And it will mess you up. And I'm just tired of dealing with all these other problems that aren't about drugs, but I know that these things are connected to drugs. That had they never done the drugs, they would never have this other problem. So what people just need to do is they just need to say no to drugs. And if they do, there's a lot of issues that you're just not going to have that other people do. So the first reason that it says in here on why people start doing drugs is social glorification. Social glorification. And it says we live in a society that glorifies alcohol use for nearly every occasion. People drink without worry at parties, small gatherings, and other social events. Television and movies portray alcohol and drug use with little to no consequences. As a whole, society minimizes the risk of acceptable substances like marijuana And as a result of this glorification, people turn to drugs and alcohol as a form of social gratification. They believe others won't accept them unless they have a drink in their hand or take a hit from a joint. The more people become accustomed to social use, the more likely they are to develop full-blown addiction. And today, you can't have a picnic. You can't have a ball game. You can't go bowling. You can't go golfing without alcohol being a part of it. Alcohol is a part of our culture in literally every area. People are drinking all the time. If you don't have alcohol at your wedding, people act like, what's wrong with you? We're not going to toast to the bride and groom? And no, we're not. And people act like us fundamental Baptists, you people are crazy, you don't do any of that stuff. But no, I'm telling you, our world's crazy, our world is sick, our world's twisted, and all this junk with alcohol is unnecessary, and we ought to reject it. When my wife and I got married, my mother-in-law, she had rented out a big fancy banquet hall for our reception. They had to pay like a $500 fee to not have the bar open, because one of the big ways they make money at that place was at the bar, because people drink for everything. And so you had to pay to have them close the bar. And they did. And they closed the bar. And there were people who showed up at the wedding going up there like, why is the bar closed? And they were shocked, mostly from her side of the family, that there was no alcohol at the wedding. And obviously, it wasn't going to happen at our wedding. We wouldn't have allowed it. If somebody would have BYOB'd, we'd have thrown them out. Because that kind of thing, it is not acceptable in our world. And you know what? It's not acceptable in my family. It's not acceptable in my church. It's not acceptable at anything that I'm at. We're not going to glorify that kind of thing. Alcohol is a drug. Alcohol destroys people's lives. And our society today, they promote it for everything. They always make it look like you're having fun. And it's wrong. But that is why people get into it. That's why they're interested in it. From what I've heard, it doesn't even taste that good. So, it's one of those things that people just do it because it's cool. And, and I'm sure, too, eventually when you learn what you're doing, you learn how to get a buzz, and there's probably some good feelings that come with it. Maybe you can forget some of your sorrows or whatever. Some people talk about taking a glass of wine to calm themselves down. And I'm going to show you why that's stupid, too. I'm going to show you how destructive it is even to do something like that. I have people, too, they excuse marijuana use. Well, it just calms me down. You are making a huge mistake when you do that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit and read some things about why that is so dumb. It is literally dumb to do that. But social glorification, and you know what? This is why, as a Christian, you need to hang around godly people. The Bible says, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. There's people out there, there's Christians that will get mad at me, and they will scorn and mock this because I'm talking like alcohol's a sin, because it is, and that social, drinking is a sin, and it is, and they will laugh, they will scorn. These are ungodly people. These are people we should not be listening to. And I'm telling you, stay away from people like that. I'm not going to hang around people that are trying to pressure me into doing something that is so destructive to my health, so destructive to my life, so destructive to my spiritual well-being. We need to walk around godly people. We need to be around wise people. And I get it. It's going to make us an outsider. You're going to be a weirdo in this world if you don't drink. But my Bible says in 1 John 2:15, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. And let me tell you, the modern Christian, they are trying so hard to fit in with this world, trying to avoid, they're trying as much as possible just to fit in, to look like the world, trying to have Jesus and all the filth and pleasures of this world too. But listen, we do have reasons to be so against this world. It is destructive what they are doing to people, and it makes me sick watching Christians promote drinking and having alcohol at their events, and especially when preachers, so-called pastors, are promoting this stuff, these people are disgusting and they are in love with the world. You are not basing your doctrine of alcohol on the facts of the Bible, on the facts of science and what it teaches and what it does to people's health. You are doing it because you are in love with this world. You want to fit in. You want to be accepted with this world. And I'm telling you right now, I would never go to a church where a pastor drank, where he promoted drinking, or just wasn't even against it. I am not interested in being around people like that. That is wrong. And this alcohol, drugs, it is being socially glorified. And as a result, a lot of people are tempted and falling into this sin and this snare. And I believe we need to villainize this stuff as much as possible. Drunks are a joke. Their lives stink. And you know what? And I've always pointed it out to my kids. When we are out soul winning and you go up to that house that's just trash, that dump that you can smell from outside, and you know what? I'll point out the beer cans that are laying all over the porch. They're laying all over the yard. And you know what I tell them? That's what happens when you become a drunk. This is why you don't drink. Do you want to live in a house like this? Is this the way that you want to live? Because this is how you'll live if you get caught up in that stuff. So the first thing they had mentioned was social glorification. Second thing they mentioned is peer pressure. Okay, and this kind of goes along with that. But, you know, peer pressure, I mean, it says affects pretty much everyone at some point. But it's most likely to leave a lasting impression on young people. Teenagers especially are vulnerable to peer pressure. Now, why is that? Because teenagers, they haven't lived a lot of life. They don't have a lot of life experience. They don't know how to see the end of a thing. And so they're typically more interested in that particular moment, and a moment when you're being laughed at, mocked, ridiculed, not liked. It can seem like the end of the world to them. After you get older, you understand how little these people matter, and you also understand what's going to happen 5-10 years from now. And so you don't care. People can laugh at me all they want for not drinking. The trendies can criticize me all they want because of my stance on alcohol. IFB preacher clips, I would love nothing more than if they shared a clip of me condemning drinking, watching all the scorners get on there and mock me and act like I'm biblically illiterate and calling me a legalist and all that kind of stuff. Not going to affect me one bit. I'll enjoy seeing it. You know, I'm not pressured by people like that because I know the end of them. And most of them in that world, I know they're present. And I'm not interested in that. Yeah, the more we are different, the better I feel, because I know what you people are all about, and that you are not what I want in my life. But young people, you know, they don't have a lot of life experience yet. They can be, there's a lot of times they can be deceived. They're just still in ignorance. And so that's why you got to be very careful with teenagers and who you have them hanging around. You don't want them hanging around people, other young people, that are going to pressure them into doing things that are sinful. They might end up doing something that you're not tempted to do. A lot of parents of Christian teenagers, they often get confused because they think because their kids grew up in church and have never been around alcohol or drugs, they'll never be tempted with it. And the thing is, they're not tempted with it. And a lot of times they think it's because they're saved. But no, it's probably because, you know, you used to do it. You understand how horrible it is. You understand how empty it is and how pointless it is. And so you don't do those things. These teenagers don't understand that too. And these young adults who grew up in the IFB and were never around that stuff either, they're like the teenager. They're still, you know, they don't know, they don't understand, and that's why they're getting into it. And eventually they'll come for full circle and they'll be back on our side. And that is if, you know, they haven't been given over to a reprobate mind for their rejection of the truth. Then I believe eventually they're going to come back around, because they will figure out in a decade that alcohol contributed nothing good to their life and only negative. So peer pressure, it's a dangerous thing. The desire to fit in is human nature. But you know, the older I get, when I was younger, yeah, I had a desire to fit in to a certain extent. I had that temptation that a lot of young people do. The older I get, the more I don't want to fit in. I mean, I'm telling you right now, I don't want to fit in with this world. I don't want to just be some contrarian, but at the same time too, I don't want to fit in with this world. And when I find out I'm like an outsider on things, it makes me actually feel pretty good. It makes me feel better. So, go ahead and scorn away trendies. You're just going to strengthen me in my position. You're going to make me feel better. I get nervous when I agree with those people. So, but Bible says in Proverbs 1:10, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, come with us, let us lay wait for blood, let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause, let us swallow them up alive as the grave and whole as those that go down to the pit, we shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our house with spoil. All those things they said to do are bad things that they know are bad, but they said we're going to get good things from it. And you know what? You need to teach young people alcohol is bad, but people are going to tell you there's good things that come from it. But you know what? Don't let them entice you. Don't let them deceive you. And it says in verse 15, my son, walk not thou in the way with them. Refrain thy foot from their path. Don't be like them. Do not be like them. And you know what? It says if sinners entice thee. Oh, well, we're all sinners. Listen, I get it that we've all transgressed God's law, but there is a way of a sinner. There are people who are living in sin. Their life is guided by whatever their flesh desires, and they are making no effort to walk in the Spirit. And you know what? We are supposed to identify them. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this generation that's been taught this foolishness of judge not, judge not, judge not, and ignore the rest of Matthew chapter 7, this is one of the reasons they're being deceived. They are being taught not to judge. We need to judge. We just don't want to be a hypocrite in our judgment. So you know what? We need to judge and figure out, are these people sinners, or are these people who are trying to live for the Lord, or are these people just giving their flesh whatever they want? We need to judge the lives and the outcomes of the lives of those who drink alcohol and do drugs. We need to judge those things. You're young. You need to teach your teenagers to judge their friends and see if there are people who love the Lord, who are obedient to their parents, or if they're rebels. And if they perceive that they're rebels, they need to stay away from them. And yes, that's judging. And you know what? A lot of trendies will have a meltdown over that. But you know what? I am not going to allow myself to be hurt because of their horrible interpretation of 2 words in the Bible while they ignore the rest of it. So judge, folks. Judge. Just judge righteous judgment. Judge righteous judgment. And it's okay for you to identify sinners and things like that. So another reason it has in the article that people get involved with drugs is self-medication is a reason. And it says in here, mental health issues are widespread. Over 50% of the population will receive a mental illness diagnosis, according to the CDC. But this number only reflects those who seek professional help. Too many people suffer in silence. Depression, anxiety, trauma, and other mental health issues may go undiagnosed for years, and many people end up turning to drugs and alcohol as a way to dull the pain. Self-medicating with drugs is a dangerous path to take. While getting high may reduce negative thoughts temporarily, it is not a healthy solution. Over time, users need larger, more frequent doses to obtain the same result. Substance abuse can harm a person physically, depending on their drug of choice. The user may experience liver, heart, or lung issues. Further overdose is a leading cause of death. Those struggling with mental health issues should seek out medical help to find a safe treatment plan. And this is newlife360inc.com where this is from, about why people do drugs. But I want to make sure I give them credit. But I agree. And here's the thing. As our world gets more wicked, as sin abounds, understand mental health issues are going to abound. As we live in a world where sexual perversion is more and more accepted, sexual abuse will be more and more common, and that kind of thing messes people's heads up. As more and more perversion and wickedness is being allowed and promoted across television, across the internet, as there's more and more access to these things, mental health issues are going to continue to grow. The solution is not medication. The solution is to separate ourselves from these things as much as we can. Now, again, a lot of young people especially can't help it. They are growing up in homes with abusive parents, lost parents, perverted parents. The things that people have to grow up with today, folks, are horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I am not trying to be unkind, and I do believe we need to be understanding towards those who are in horrible situations. I get why people are turning to drugs, but unfortunately, they aren't being taught alternatives, and there are alternatives, and they don't realize that these things are going to do more damage in the long run. And I can't imagine living with some of the things that people live with. I mean, we've got kids today that are growing up in homes of same-sex couples. I mean, these kids are going to be messed up in the head. There's no doubt about it. But drugs isn't a solution. It's not going to help. Yes, it might temporarily dull the pain. It might temporarily give you some feeling of relief. But I'm going to read something here towards the end. It's going to show how this is going to backfire on you. Overall, it's going to make it worse. People who are living in homes like this, they need to seek help. They need to, turn these people in for abuse. And I know that's easier said than done. It's hard. These people feel trapped. Folks, again, I'm not trying to be unmerciful here. I believe we should be very merciful towards people that are on drugs. I think more and more rehab things are going to be needed as time goes on. But just understand that this is going to continue to grow as perversion grows in our world. But either way, drugs doesn't make things better. Even though I understand why people who are desperate, who are ignorant, who are not being taught any truth, are turning to these things. I'm just telling those of you who are listening to me, don't you get involved in it. And especially, too, those of you that are growing up in Christian homes and are being taught right, you especially don't do it. Because unfortunately, even kids who grow up in good homes often turn to these things for, the social reasons. But again, too, sometimes there are, super legitimate reasons to be upset and suffering anxiety, depression, things like that. And this leads us to the fourth reason it has on there that people often turn to drugs and alcohol is grieving after loss. Okay, now, when you lose somebody, that's horrible. Nobody expects you to feel good because of that. I get it. It says here, loss is a natural part of life. Everybody's going to lose somebody. And, it's something everyone will experience at some point. The fact doesn't make coping any easier. The sudden death of a loved one or ending of a long-term relationship may affect a person emotionally and physically. Grief may cause sudden bouts of depression. It can also manifest as physical pain. And some people experiment with drugs as a way to find relief. Everyone grieves differently. Some go through the process relatively quickly, while others struggle to find peace for several years. The longer it takes to process grief, the more likely a person is to turn to drugs or alcohol. Seeking professional counseling is the best way to handle grief. A therapist can give you the tools needed to deal with any negative emotions in a healthy way. So again, nobody's mad at you if you are struggling mentally, emotionally after some terrible loss. Nobody would be mad at you for that. But here's what you have to understand. Anybody who goes through a tragedy, a trial, they are going to need something to lean on. Okay? It's normal. Here's the question though. What are you going to choose to lean on? Because if drugs is not a good crutch. Okay? Now, and this is easy for me to say. Okay? But I'm telling you, it's during these difficult times where we have to learn to lean on the Lord, where we have to lean on our faith. Okay? Except if a person gets a broken leg, they need a crutch. Okay? But So we all want to use a crutch that will make us stronger, that will make us better, not something that's going to cause more problems and greater pain. And so I want to read this other thing I read about, this is from addictioncenter.com, about drugs. Here's what you got to understand. Again, nobody's mad at you if you're going through a trial and you have turned to, and you feel like you need some kind of help. Okay, so look at what this says. It says drugs work by increasing the amounts of dopamine in your brain. Dopamine allows pleasurable feelings. You can feel it naturally by kissing a significant other or eating your favorite food. This produces a small natural amount that makes you feel good. Okay, we all want to feel good sometimes, especially when you're down. When a drug enters your system, they produce an overabundance of dopamine within the brain. The overabundance causes intense feelings of pleasure, many times much more than the natural healthy amounts your brain is used to. Because there is an overabundance of dopamine that the drugs are instilling, your brain will compensate and naturally produce less. Now pay attention to this. What happens when the drug loses its effects, you have a lack of dopamine produced within your brain, leading to a physical and mental crash. You often feel depressed and lethargic, as if the whole world was crashing down on you. What do? You try to wait it out and get over the after effect, but it just seems too hard. The strength to fight this seems to be dwindling. A hopeless outlook takes over, and you start to cave in. Once again, the drug is abused, but this time it's different. After prolonged use, you don't take drugs to feel the extended pleasure of the initial use. You take drugs to feel physically stable and normal again. This is addiction. So, hope you were paying attention to that. This is why you don't want to use drugs and alcohol. When you suffer a loss, okay, again, that's horrible. I mean, nobody is down on you for feeling bad and needing something. But you want to feel good again. You want to have that positive feeling again. The problem is when you turn to these unnatural things, it only does it temporarily, and it does it in a way that will make it harder for you in the future to naturally have a good feeling. Because we don't want to be dependent on a chemical substance to make us feel good. If we want to make sure when we have that, get that dopamine, when we have those feel good moments, that it's from things that are healthy, things that are not sinful. These are the things that we need to look to. And the problem is when you start using drugs, you're going to get to where the things that normal people do to feel good aren't going to do anything for you. They're not going to have an effect on you anymore. And now you are someone who is dependent on these things. You are a drug addict. You're now having all these other health problems. It's creating all these other issues, and you just need this stuff more and more and more. And so, when it comes to faith things, I get it. It's easier said than done. But this is why you need to get around good Christians. Get around people who've been through some of these things before. They can help you. The Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4:13 said, "But I would not have you be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope." Christians have sorrow, but we don't have to sorrow the way the world does. And it is. And I've watched Christians go through things that I can't even imagine going through. And I've seen them get through these things, continue living for the Lord, being obedient. And I look at that and I'm always encouraged by that, because I know God did it for them. And they'll be the first ones to tell you, God got me through this. And I find comfort in that, because if something ever happens to me, I'm glad I have some examples of people that knew how to run to God and to use Him and to use faith as their crutch to get them through an injury. I'm glad I have those people, because I may need that one of these days. But I know other people, the people who turn to drugs, the people who turn to alcohol, the problem with them, they never get better. They're never victorious. They remain in that horrible, horrible state. And man, yeah, I'll be the first one, to, feel sorry for you when you go through a loss, to cry with you and to hurt with you. Nobody's mad at you for feeling bad. You want to feel good again, but please don't turn to drugs and alcohol. They will not help you. They will eventually make it so you are dependent on those things, and you will not be able to just live a normal life and to find pleasure in normal things like normal people do. You're hurting yourself so bad. And folks, alcohol is included with this. That's why a lot of people turn to things like alcohol. That's why a lot of people turn to things like marijuana, okay? Because they're trying to get a good feeling. And that takes us to the fifth reason that people turn to drugs and alcohol. It's reducing stress. Okay? When you're stressed, you're stressed for a reason. Life gets tough sometimes. We have pressure on us at work. You've got family pressures. You have financial obligations. These things can really weigh on you. And we've been there before. We've all been stressed out. And I've been stressed out many times in my life. But you know what? You do not want to turn to chemical things to help you get through those stressful times. Because again, when you're stressed, you're stressed for a reason. So maybe it's something that needs fixed. Maybe you need to fix something. It's like when you have pain in your body, it's because something is wrong and you need to fix what's wrong. Sometimes you need to go to a chiropractor. I know we're guys, we're too tough to go to the doctor for anything. Sometimes you need to go to the doctor. Sometimes you need to be fixed. Sometimes you need something cut out of you. I had to have a surgery one time. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to do that kind of stuff, but you have to, because these things, they're big problems. And a lot of times people, and I'm not saying this is for every case when you're stressed, but sometimes people are stressed because they're managing their life poorly. Sometimes they're stressed because they're working a job that maybe they shouldn't be working. Maybe this line of work you're in is not a good line of work to be in. Maybe you need to find a different job. Maybe you need to find something else. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's things you can't help. Ladies, sometimes they're stressed because they're raising their kids. Well, you can't just drop your kids off at the fire station. Sometimes just things in life, there's some things that you can't necessarily get out of, but you know what you can't do? You can't turn to drugs to get you through those things, because there's going to be greater side effects. And this is one of the biggest excuses too people use for marijuana, for drinking, for the legal stuff. It just calms me down. No, it gives you a good feeling when you're not feeling good. You know what you're doing to your brain? You're giving yourself that unnatural amount of dopamine, and you're getting your brain to stop producing it when you need it. I don't want to have to be dependent on these things. I want to be able to feel good on my own without a pill, without a joint. And all those things too, they cost money. So, all you're doing when you're under stress from your financial problems and you're spending money on junk like that, you realize you're not fixing your financial problems. Your financial problems aren't going away because you feel good after taking a drink, because you feel good after smoking a joint. They're only worse. But you made you feel better for a little bit. But overall, it's bad. Don't do this. So don't. There's always somebody too that's going to tell you, marijuana, it isn't even unhealthy. Okay? But no. You are making yourself dependent on a drug, and it is a drug, to make you feel good. I don't think anybody wants to be dependent on these things. Don't be dependent on it. It's going to mess you up. So the sixth thing that big reason people get involved in drugs and alcohol is thrill seeking. People, they're just looking for some kind of thrill. And again, there's drugs out there that apparently make people feel really, really good. Okay, I mean, I don't doubt that there isn't some thrill in some of these things. If it wasn't, nobody would be doing it. Okay? I don't doubt that. But you know what? Again, you're messing up your brain. We should be able to find our thrills doing normal things. Listen, if you need a thrill, go skydiving or something like that. But go, I don't know, go bungee jumping, go do something like that. And do those kind of things. Don't go doing and chemically altering your brain. It's not going to work. But a lot of people, they do it for fun. I remember, my dad was always very just outspoken with people. My dad was the kind of guy, if he was out in public and people started using language, I mean, he'd yell at him right there. And I'll never forget this. We were at the grocery store one time. I was just a teenager, and there were these young guys, and they were probably barely old enough to even buy alcohol. And there was 3 of them. I'll never forget this. And they were sitting there, and they're all looking at the alcohol, trying to decide which one they're going to get. And they always put the alcohol like right across from the water and all that stuff. And so, you're just trying to go and just buy normal stuff, and then you got to look at all the booze. And that always ticked my dad off too. And so I think he wanted to affect these people's business negatively, but I think more you just want to help these guys. But they were there looking at it, and my dad he just looked right at me. He's like, you guys don't need any of that stuff. He's like, why do you even want to buy that stuff? That's not gonna do anything for it. And I remember listening to the guy there. He's just like, we're just wanting to have fun. And my dad's like, you know what? There's other ways you can have fun. You shouldn't need alcohol to have fun. And he just got on him right there, and those guys ended up walking off too. They probably came back later and bought the alcohol. But you know what? He did, it's not going, you shouldn't need alcohol to have fun. How lame are you that you have to have alcohol to have fun? Okay, again, go to Six Flags, go ride a roller coaster, go do something like that. But the fact that you think you need to have alcohol to have fun just shows how lame and pathetic you really are. All that's going to do is make you think you're having fun when you're not really doing anything different. And so, again, but that, when you go on a roller coaster, you go skydiving, if you have a thrill that way, you know what? You at least are still just as healthy as you were before, assuming you don't get hurt. 2 of my sisters actually just went skydiving. I'm a little jealous, yet at the same time, I'm not jealous. Because I used to want to do that, but now it's like, you know what? I don't really want to jump out of an airplane. But, I imagine, but, you can kind of get a thrill from that. But, that is one of the dumbest things. Doing drugs just for the thrill of it. Before you do any of that stuff, you need to go visit the homes of some druggies, because you're going to get addicted to that stuff. It's not worth it. And so then the last thing here, and this kind of goes along with it too, is boredom. It says boredom. Now, and you say, well, what would boredom? How would that cause you to drink? Well, it says here, boredom is a leading reason people turn to drugs. Or is a leading reason people turn to drugs. And it's also why so many recovering addicts relapse. But it's hard to believe people feel bored in a world full of streaming content, social media, and smartphones. And that's why it's crucial to redefine the word. Boredom doesn't only occur when you have nothing to do, it also sneaks up when you feel isolated or trapped. Unfortunately, when people feel bored, they'll do almost anything to escape. They may try drugs as a way to break up the monotony. At first, drugs and alcohol may seem glamorous and exciting, but experimenting soon becomes a habit. Before long, it turns into an addiction. Breaking the cycle of addiction is never an easy process. When boredom strikes, it's better to find a new hobby or mingle with friends to avoid the consequences of using drugs. And I agree that I do think boredom is a big cause, because one thing that I see a lot, especially in young men who get caught up in junk and stupidity and foolish, the problem is they don't have anything to do. And this is why men need to work jobs. Listen, if you are young, and especially if you are young and single, you need a job, and you need one that's going to wear you out. And if you have a job and it's not wearing you out, then you need to join a gym. You need to do something to wear yourself out. You need to keep yourself busy doing productive things. This is why you should be involved in a church. People need to be around other people. So young people, do you want to get around, wicked people, or do you want to get around godly people? Now, again, here's kind of a problem in a lot of churches today. You've got a lot of churches with no young people, and that's often difficult for a lot of people. But you know what? You need to find a church where you can get around other godly people, and it'll help keep you out of trouble. You need to work. Too many guys just have too much time on their hands, and as a result, they get in trouble. And that's always something, the idle mind is the devil's workshop or something like that, or playground. I forgot how that saying goes exactly, but idleness always gets you in trouble. And throughout time, young men, whenever they get together with nothing to do, they get in trouble. You can go take some decent young men and just put them together with nothing productive to do, and eventually they will get in trouble. It's human nature. And that's why you got to keep busy. And that's why, too, it's important, man, if you can find a wife while you're young, get married. Enjoy that wife of your youth. You're not in sin if you don't get married young, but you are in sin if you're doing nothing and getting yourself in trouble. So you know what? Find something to do. And marriage will help you, because when you're married, having kids will help you. They keep you busy. They keep you tired. They will help keep you responsible. They can also cause stress. There are also challenges that come with them. So again, that's where you've got to learn how to manage these things right. You got to learn how to look to healthy things. But young people that are immediately turning to drugs, that are immediately turning to alcohol and all these other things, it's probably only going to get worse for them when they get married. A lot of people think, well, I won't have any more problems with addictions. I won't struggle with pornography. I won't struggle with all these other things once I get married. Yes, you will. If you're struggling with it now, if you've trained yourself to turn to those things now, that's what you're going to turn to even after you get married and even after you have kids. Because it's going to get stressful. So you've got to learn to turn to good things. And unfortunately, people aren't doing that today. And it's drugs. And notice in that one article, I forgot the website, the addictioncenter.com, right? This is like some Christian organization thing. But it's basically showing in there how when you start using these drugs, it starts doing something to your brain where it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. It doesn't make you feel the way you're supposed to feel. It changes how you are. And that just reminded me, I started thinking of several scriptures when I read that, because it just reminds me of some things in the Bible. Because there are some, and these things, they are sin. Okay? They are sin. Because people say, well, you can't show me a verse where drinking alcohol is a sin. Well, actually, I can. But here's what people are missing, and that is that it's not about what goes into the mouth. Okay, that's not so much the problem. But again, it's not what goes in the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out. Okay, and alcohol typically makes perversion come out, and we've got scripture on that. Not gonna go. Well, I am gonna go to that scripture because I do want to show you something in that passage that goes along with what I'm trying to show you here. But when you start doing these things that are sinful, you start numbing yourself. You start making yourself where you don't feel the way that you are supposed to feel. It's like people who get caught up in a lot of sexual perversion. The reason they got caught up in that sexual perversion is because they were doing things outside of marriage. They were doing things that a person should not be doing, and it started negatively affecting them in a way where things that would make normal people happy don't make you happy anymore. This is why you should never, ever, ever get involved with things like pornography. It will mess you up. You will not feel and respond the way that you should feel and respond to things. And so let me look at some verses that just kind of remind you of this. But it says, in Proverbs 23:29, who hath woe, who hath sorrow, who hath contentions, who hath babbling, who hath wounds without cause, who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Now, Solomon is saying all these things. This is a result of just experience, wisdom, things he's seen. So, and the fact that we're even debating whether or not alcohol is okay, whether or not marijuana is okay in 2022, okay, I believe that we're there because of a generation that was taught, judge not, judge not, judge not. He's judging right here. You see people who behave this way, who are they? I'll tell you who they are. They're people who tarry long at the wine. And so he's warning his son, look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth this color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last, not at the first, at the last. This is where it leads. This is where it goes. Oh, it's a slippery slope fallacy. All right, you can call it whatever you want, okay? I don't want to be bit like a serpent and be stung like an adder. But that's what happens when you're around alcohol. It says, thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. All of a sudden now you're going to have a desire to do things you didn't used to have a desire to do. There was a time where you would have found satisfaction just being normal with your wife. But now all of a sudden, you don't feel that way anymore. What happened? You did something to your brain. You're not getting pleasure from the normal, natural things anymore. Why? You did something to your brain. You know what? Alcohol does that. They have scientifically proven Proverbs 23 true. That's what that article is all about, folks. This backs up what Proverbs 23 is saying. It says, yea, thou shalt be, is he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or is he that lieth upon the top of a mast? They have stricken me, thou shalt say, and I was not sick. They have beat me, and I felt it not. And when shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. You won't learn your lesson. You're suffering all this pain, and yet you're not learning anything from it. You're not responding. You know why? Because things that affect normal people aren't affecting you anymore. You know why? Because you messed yourself up with alcohol. And you didn't do it with just one drink. It's something that goes over time. And again, I do think, there are passages where it's talking about drinking wine stuff because I think they used it for medicinal purposes in the Bible, but you don't take medicine just for fun. And even good medicine, okay? When I had surgery, I got all kinds of drugs during that whole thing. It was necessary for that time. But if I regularly took those things, I would mess myself up. And I have never gone back and taken those drugs again. And I hope I never need them again. And you know what? If the time ever comes where I need drugs, where I need morphine, I'm glad it's there. I'm glad it's available. And I won't be in sin when I take it. Because it's not a sin just to, let morphine enter your body. Because if it were, then it would always be a sin. But no, the sin is not so much on what you put in your body, but it's about why you're doing it. And if you're just doing these things just for the fun of it, for recreation, that is an abuse. You are violating the principles in the Bible too about things like gluttony. Okay? There's nothing wrong with eating. There's nothing wrong with eating until you're full. There's nothing wrong with things like that. But when you are overindulging in things and in a way that's wasteful, that is a sin. And when you're taking these drugs and things that might have a medicinal purpose, that might have a positive use somewhere, and you're just taking it to take it, you're a glutton and a drunkard. And don't we see gluttony and drunkenness go together a lot? That's exactly what you are. People want to make gluttony all about the food that they eat. But you know what? Gluttony isn't just about food. It's about the alcohol. It's about the drugs. And anybody who's taking that stuff just to take it, as far as I'm concerned, you're a glutton. And shame on you. You should be embarrassed for yourself. So Proverbs 23 backs up what that article, or I should say that article backs up Proverbs 23. Science backs up the Bible. Ephesians 4:17 says, this I say therefore and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling have given themselves over unto lasciviousness to work all uncleanness with greediness. Did you see that, folks? These people, they're past feeling. They don't feel things the way they are anymore. They don't have a conscience anymore. You know why? Because they gave themselves over to lasciviousness. Why did they do it? They gave themselves to all the pleasures of the flesh. Why? Because they needed it? No, out of greediness. They got greedy. And yes, there are some positive uses for many of the drugs and things that are out there in the world today. But when you're just taking it for pleasure, you're greedy. And you're doing it to satisfy your flesh. And you eventually, you keep doing that. You give yourself to those things, you will be past feeling. Right there, that article is also backing up Ephesians chapter 4. We just kind of scientifically now know why Ephesians 4 is true. Okay? It's always been true. Proverbs 23, Ephesians 4, these things have always been true. But you know what? Science, again, it's backing up what the Bible says. And you know how Paul knew these things? Paul wasn't a biochemist. He didn't understand those things. Solomon didn't understand those things. They knew these things from experience, wisdom, from judging. They watched people. They saw how they acted. They saw how things progressed, and they looked. They analyzed the situation. They said, these people got broken. They have no conscience. They have no feeling. In 1 Thessalonians 4:2, talking about false prophets. How could you lie to people about the truths of the Scripture, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron? Now, nobody took a hot iron and seared their conscience, literally. But figuratively speaking, they did things to themselves. They allowed themselves to do things that eventually took away that conscience, where they didn't feel the way normal people feel. Most of us, there's certain things, if we did them, it is going to hurt our gut. It's going to hurt our heart. It's going to bring us pain. It'll make you sick. Might even make you throw up. You know what? Thank God when that happens. It means your conscience hasn't been seared with a hot iron. But let me tell you something. When you feel bad like that, what are you going to turn to? Are you going to turn to repentance? Are you going to get things right? Are you going to confess that sin? Or are you going to hide it? Because if you do that, you're going to turn to something. You're going to go to something to make you feel better. And if you turn to anything other than what God wants you to go to, all you're going to do is you're going to make yourself more numb to things that you shouldn't be numb to. So, Proverbs, it talks about things that are without remedy. It says in Proverbs 6:14, "Frowardness is in his heart, he deviseth mischief continually, he soweth discord, therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy." There's some things that you can't fix. Bible says in Proverbs 29:1, "He that being often reproved," when you get reproved, it does. The first time you get reproved, man, it makes you feel bad. You feel guilty. You want to do something. But you know what? If you ignore it, you fight through it, and your brain's going to go somewhere to make you feel good, justify it, might talk to a friend. I don't know what it's going to be. But you keep doing it, eventually it's not going to do anything anymore. And then you're going to be destroyed, and there will be no fixing you. And how many people are there today? They're beyond help. You know why? Because they were reproved, and they were reproved, and they said no, they said no, they said no. And you know what? They got broken, and there's no fixing it. They allowed their conscience to be seared with a hot iron, and they're not going to get it back. And so I just show you all this to just encourage everyone, say no to drugs. If you drank before, you know what? Quit now. It's only going to get worse if you keep doing it. I've already taken drugs. Quit now. Quit while you can. And those of you that haven't tried it, never, ever, ever try it. You will not be able to live a normal life. And I am just tired of seeing the effects of these things. And let me tell you, I get angry when a Christian tries to justify drug use, marijuana, alcohol. That fires me up. That ticks me off. Don't try doing that around me. I want none of that in my life. I don't want you justifying that stuff around my kids, because I don't want them ever messing with that stuff, because you know what? I judge. And I have judged that people who mess with that stuff, they ruin their lives and they are miserable, and that it is not worth it. And I don't want my family being deceived into that. And I don't want them walking in the counsel of the ungodly. So you know what? Stay away from me. If you stay away from my family, if you think that this stuff is okay, you're bad news. You're going to be destroyed without remedy. And I don't want you taking other people down that I'm close to and that I love with me. And so I'm telling you to learn to be independent of things and not allow these things. That's why you ought to fast every once in a while. Some of you need to realize how pathetic you are and just go a day without eating. And it's going to be 10 o'clock and you're going to think you're dying. You know why? Because you're addicted to food. You're addicted to the salt and the sugar. You could go a day without eating and it's not going to kill you, but you're going to think you're going to die, because a lot of our food is addictive. Some people, they can't even go a week without caffeine or something. And again, there are some things like caffeine, certain food, that have negative effects, but they're very, very minimal. Okay. And, there's not major consequences to those things. But, I think, and so, the thing is, if you can't even conquer a caffeine addiction, what do you think is going to happen to you? You get an alcohol addiction, if you get a drug addiction. Maybe you ought to do some fast every once in a while just to train yourself and get your body in subjection so these things never happen to you. I think that's very important. It will help you spiritually. It'll help you across the board. So anyway, I hope this was a help and a blessing to you. Say no. I hate to sound, cliche, but just say no to drugs. Say no to alcohol. Say no to marijuana. It's all garbage. So thank you all for watching. We'll see you all next week.